Second to come in. Y'all know I'm outside. I love outside. This is my favorite spot. Every single day that the weather is good, you will catch Doc D on the deck. You see what I did there with the alliterations, as I do. As you're tuning in, listen, y'all know what to do. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Don't be a stranger. Don't be shy. This is not the place for that. But I want to talk to you today. I'm going to give you all a few seconds. I know that there's a tad bit of a delay. I want to also make sure that you guys can hear me fairly clearly before I just start talking and all of that stuff. But what I want to talk about is the path to having it all. And I know that we live in I do rather. I live in the US of A, right? The land of the free, the home of the brave, um, where people come to get the American dream, having it all. And all could mean something very different, something different for every single person. So, um, that's subjective, so I'm not going to get into that, but you have the concept or the idea of what I'm talking about. But I want to talk about the path to having it all, the difference in the process of being able to attain or achieve what you want, you know, where you have partial possession or you have the full promise. Now I'm gonna take y'all Bible. Is that okay? Can I take y'all Bible today? If you would just comment if you want Bible. Yes, yes. If you don't, I'm still gonna give it to you. But I want to talk about the the children of Israel and the process, the path to having it all. I want to talk about this story because it is so relevant to the difference between those who have partial possession and those who have the full promise, which means they have it all. And so we see how it seems like some people, they say what they want, they go after it, they get it. And then we see some who say what they want and they may get some of it, but they don't get all of it. And so I want to talk about this because I believe that this particular story is very parallel to what the process is to actually having it all. And so, um, first and foremost, when I read or when I think about, the children of Israel, at the very beginning, they were given a command to go and possess the land, right? That was what happened. They were given a command. So, even the command or the call to have it all, it is available to all of those who believe. So, let's just get that out there. It is available to all of those who believe. And so, they were given a command. They were given a command to possess the land. It was right there. It was right in their faces. They could see, the journey for them to get there was only going to take them 11 days. Now, if you know the backstory of this, it was only supposed to take them 11 days to actually get to their promised land, to get to their all, having it all. However, they ended up wandering and staying in the wilderness for 40 years. Good God Almighty. From 11 days to 40 years. So let's talk about what this process looks like. And this is something that I see happens to so many, right? The first thing that happened where they were given a command to go and possess the land. So the evidence that they could have it, that it was theirs, that their name was written on it. Somebody say, with my name on it, with their name on it. It was already there. They didn't have to beg for it. They didn't have to ask for it. It was simply theirs. It was promised to them. And so, however, something happened that I thought was very, very, very unique. When they got the call, the first thing they wanted was confirmation. When they received the command to go possess the land that was already theirs, that was already promised to them, that already had their name on it, right? Instead of them going, which means instead of them continuing forward to go get what was theirs, they needed confirmation. How do we know? Because what they did was they said, we need somebody to go and scout out the land. Basically, like, let's make sure it's really there. Let's make sure what's over there is better than what we have right now. So they was like, we need the scouts to go and look at the land. How many of you, when God has told you, hey, this is yours, you can have it, your name is on it, that is your promise, my promise to you, and you need confirmation? You need something or someone else to validate what God already said was yours. I want y'all to track this with me. Y'all are not talking. I need y'all to talk back to me today. How many times have we done that? We look and we can clearly see that we can have it all because of what he said, what he promised us, because of who he is. And instead of us just continuing forward on the path to go get what's already ours, we need someone else to confirm it. We need somebody else to go and be like, well, yeah, God said it, or yeah, it's good, right? So that was the first thing that happened. So they were looking for, that confirmation. And the thing about confirmation is actually, it can be evidence of fear. And it is also evidence that you have not yet learned to fully trust God's voice in what he's saying to you. He stands on it. If anybody stands on business, it's him, right? So that was the first thing. They needed confirmation. So now, after the confirmation, and even though the scouts came back and was like, yeah, it's good, like God is, what he said is good, that land over there is good. And they even brought back proof, because they brought back some of the fruit and things like that to let them know, like, we're not just making this up, it's really good on the other side. Okay. Now, the next thing that happened after they felt like they needed confirmation, the next thing that happened was that they began to complain. They started to complain. Now, here's the crazy thing. The command was there. The promise was there. They didn't like the situation that they were in, but they weren't willing to take that next step to get out of what they were in. Instead, they sat there and they began to complain. Now, the thing about the complaint that I thought was so significant was they complained about what could possibly happen. They called out, let me change that from complain to called out. They called out all of the things that were up against them. This is going to be good if y'all allow it to be, okay? So first they called out all of the things that were against them. They talked about the people in the town being bigger than them. They talked about how big those people's walls were, how big their town was. They talked about all of the things that they felt disqualified them, or that were against them being able to access the promise. Now, how many times have we found ourselves in this situation where God is saying, listen, that's your promise, I'm giving it to you, but we look at all of the things that we may not have, or we look at all of the reasons why we may not qualify. We look at all of the reasons why we may not deserve it, right? So we start calling out all of the things, and that's what they began to do. So when they looked at the odds that were stacked against them, when they looked at the things that seemingly could have destroyed them or could have prevented them from the promise, the next thing they did was complain. They started to complain and accuse God of sending them to a place to get slaughtered. They looked at this situation and said, no, this is a setup, right? God is not really going to give me that. This is a setup. He sent me over here so that something could happen to me. That's where they was. So when they saw this and all of these things that were stacked against them, Moses said to them, he said, listen, don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. Okay. So when we look at certain situations and the odds could be stacked against us, it is so easy for us to get discouraged, or even fearful, right? And so Moses said, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. He said, God has gone before you. And I thought about that when he said God has gone before you. I'm like, what does that mean? God went before them not only to prepare, but he paved the way and to protect them from anything that could stop them from getting to their promise. See, when it comes to you having it all and having all of the things that you desire to have, even if there are obstacles, even if there is opposition, even though there is something opposing, right? Or an opponent, remembering that God has already gone before you and he has paved the way, he has prepared the path, he's prepared the way, and he's protecting you from anything that can actually stop you from getting that promise. And sometimes it's yourself. Sometimes it's the doubt. Sometimes it's the fear. Sometimes it's the belief that you don't deserve it, or having it all is just not possible. And oh, my internet is tripping. Are y'all still there? Highly Savior. Okay. I don't know. It's frozen on my end. Can somebody tell me if I'm still good? Because I can see the timer. I'm still good? Okay, well, it's just frozen on my end. So it is what it is. So, God had already gone before them and prepared the way, paved the path, and he also promised them that he would protect them, right? Now, here's the thing about this whole story. You can't, okay. So here's the thing. So after they began to, okay, as long as y'all can hear me, I'm good. But after they began to complain, and Moses told them, he said, hey, listen, he's already gone before you. He's prepared the way, right? So the crazy thing about being able to have it all is you have to continue the journey, even when opposition faces you, even when there are things that are telling you that you can't have it all. Even when you're having those moments of, of doubt and or fear, you have to continue the journey. So after the complaining, right, God was pretty much fed up with the foo-foo. He was like, you know what? Y'all are not even going to enter into the promised land. Now, stay with me because this is going to take you somewhere. He said, y'all are not going to enter into the promised land because of the complaining. Again, you have to remember that there were the original journey for them to get to the full promise, to be able to have it all that God had promised them, was 11 days. They ended up in their own wilderness, in the wilderness for 40 years because of their complaining, their refusal to continue the journey, and because they considered all of the things that were against them in that process. Okay, so fear and all of that. Now, they eventually realized that they were complaining and all this stuff, so they repented. And he still said, nope, you're not going into the promised land. What's going to happen now is that what was promised to you is going to be passed on to those who had enough faith to believe. Those who were willing to trust me at my word and continue moving forward as I told them to, even with all the other things that were standing in their way. And so they eventually again repented, and they decided, okay, you know what? We're going to just start obeying and doing what God said. Now, here's the crazy thing. God had already gone before them. All they had to do was go through it. However, because they delayed and complained, now when they got ready to walk through the path to the promised land, they now had to pay. They now had to start paying for things that were actually already ready for them. They wouldn't have had to pay for if they had a trusted God at his word the first time and just continued on the journey that he had told them to continue on. Okay? Now, here's the difference between those who have it all, which means those who have full possession, who access the full promise of God, and those who only have partial possession. There's partial possession, and then there's the full promise of God. Okay? So, on this journey, after they made up their mind that they were going to do what they were supposed to do, they started going through the path, right? They continued on through the path. There were some places where, because of their disobedience and their delay, they had to now pay. It cost them something. Complaining is costly. questioning God's plan and what he's promised you is costly, right? So now they had to start paying for some stuff. However, because of who he is and his grace, they still were able to continue through the journey. And then in some of the land, they were able to possess part of what they got on that journey due to their obedience. However, once they got to the promised land, where all they had to do was cross over, they had to pass on their promise to the people who simply believed and took God at his word. So here's what I'm saying to you. For you to have it all, everything that he's been promising you, he's promised you, the things that you have prayed for you to have it all, it requires you to trust God at his word. That's it. And that's all. Because when he said he went before them, he had already made the path clear. He'd already made it plain. They simply needed to believe him. When God says that you can have something, you do not need confirmation from anyone else, because his word is all the confirmation that you need. Okay? That's it. You don't need anybody else to approve it. You don't need anyone else to put their stamp of their seal on it. You simply just need to believe God at his word. The reason I have been able to generate over $1 million in my business, be married 19 years, send 3 kids to college, build a ministry, reach millions and millions of people all over the world, was not because I was perfect. It's because I believed God's promise. I believed that what I prayed for was in alignment with God, what God had already promised me. And there was opposition along the way. There were people trying to convince me that you cannot be a successful businesswoman. You cannot have a lot of influence and have a healthy, happy marriage. You can't do all of this and have, a great relationship with your children, or be, a good, a good mother. You can't. There were so many people that wanted to convince me that I couldn't do those things, but I believed the promise. I believed that God said I could have whatever my heart desired. I believed that I didn't have to sacrifice my family for success, or my success for my family. I believe the promise. And that is why I've been able to have the things, not because I'm perfect, not because I didn't make mistakes, not because there wasn't opposition, not because fear didn't knock at the door, not because doubt didn't try to dismantle. It's simply because what he says, I believed it, I stood on it, and the journey that he's told me to go on, I followed the path that he had already prepared for me. Because the only thing that hasn't changed in this world in 2,000 years is the word of God. Now, there are different variations, right? Different versions, but the word has still remained the same. And so if I'm going to believe in anything, I'm going to believe in something, in someone that has never changed. So when I was looking at this, what I was saying was that the only difference in those who received the partial promise and those who received the full promise was not their perfection. It was their belief in the promise that they could have it all. There will always be something that's going to try to tell you that you don't deserve it, that you're asking for too much, that you're doing too much, that you don't need all of that, that it is impossible. There's always going to be opposition. They're always going to look like there are walls. Even when they in Deuteronomy, they were looking at how big and tall the walls were, how many people were against them, how much more those people had than they had, right? So their complaint was not really about just complaining against God. Their complaint was because they were looking at other people. They were looking at other people instead of looking at the one who gave them the promise. And so you can talk yourself out of all that you want, all that you desire, simply because you are looking at other people. You're looking at what people have that you may not have. You're looking at listening to what people said that's contrary to what you're believing. And you can literally talk yourself out of that and stay in your own wilderness and live and having partial possession instead of having the full promise, right? And so when people would say things to me, because I don't have the idea life or story, right? And some of you may have heard my story and some of you may have not. But I didn't have the Cinderella story, you know? Um, my story was quite different. My path was quite different, right? I have, I already had kids when I met my husband. I had two children before I met my husband. I was a mom at 15. Um, I was fired from my job. I came from a poverty town, a small town of population of only 1,500 people. You know, uh, I mean, there are so many things stacked against me that, according to people, didn't qualify me for the promise. And I was basically told at one time, someone literally told me, "You're never going to be anything but a ghetto baby mama." Now, here's the thing about the doc. I've always been a brilliant mind. I've always been extremely smart, extremely intelligent, very intellectual, philosophical, all of the things, right? However, I also have some hood. I'm also a little bit hood, and I don't shy away from that. Like, I'm not ashamed of where I come from. And the thing is, instead of me allowing what people said about me to plant a seed of disqualification, what it did was it set me on fire with determination. I'm going to say that again for the ones in the back. Instead of allowing what people said about me to plant a seed of disqualification, okay, I used that seed for determination. I turned it into determination, not to prove them wrong, but simply to prove God right. Because I'm not concerned about proving people wrong, because people are entitled to feel how they feel. They're entitled to their opinions. You get what I'm saying? So I wasn't concerned about proving anyone wrong. You're entitled to your opinion. But here's the thing. All of the things that, according to society or anyone else who didn't know God's plan for my life, um, according to them, the things that I went through, the mistakes that I made should have disqualified me. However, here's the thing that I want you to understand. Because I came from the hood, but I was also extremely intelligent and extremely smart, I know how to have a conversation from the block to the boardroom. You get what I'm saying? I know how to stand on the corner and have a conversation with a drug dealer, and sit in a boardroom and talk to a Fortune 500 company CEO who makes billions. And I can still relate to them and connect to them on that level. See, what people think is supposed to keep you from having it all and having the promise are the very ingredients, if you allow them to help you be effective in what you're called to do. I can reach and speak to millions in diverse backgrounds, because of where I came from, because of what I went through. You get what I'm saying? And even when I tell people, I learned a lot, even from dating street pharmaceuticals, if you will, okay? I learned a lot from them. I learned how to build a team, not from my job in corporate America. I learned how to build a team by watching how drug dealers built their teams. I learned how to know and how to study data about what product is good and not. Now I didn't make no drugs, I ain't do none of that. I'm just saying, I was a studier. I was an observer. So what someone else would see as a mistake, Romans 8:28 says, "But God works together all things for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose." There's nothing in my life that was wasted, right? And even on the path and the journeys where it's not ideal or somebody could look down their nose at me, I don't see it that way. I don't allow my past to become my prison. I allow my past prepared me for the promise. My past prepared me for me to be able to have it all. I'm able to do many things that some other people can't do because of where I've been and what I've gone through, what I've endured. I just don't allow those things to, um, to determine my worth or my value. You get what I'm saying? And so I didn't have the traditional path of, oh, she met her Prince Charming and they got married. I didn't have a high school sweetheart story. I didn't have a story where, my parents were fortunate enough to put me on, to give me a hand up. I didn't have that story. However, I was determined that no one else was going to decide my destiny. Do you get what I'm saying? No one was going to tell me, oh, because you have 2 kids and you're not going to be able to get married, you're not going to have a good husband, or you came from a poverty town, or you were a teen mom, so you can't make millions. You used to fight and used to do all these things, so you can't empower women. You can't stand on the stages and speak to hundreds and thousands of people. And there'll be a day where I'll stand on the stage and speak to millions of people. I've actually already spoken into the lives of millions of people right from the comfort of my screen. You get what I'm saying? Because again, regardless of what was against me, as you think about, when you go back and read Deuteronomy 1, chapters 1 through 3, so that this story makes sense. But when you go back and read it, despite all of the things that were against me, as they looked at all the things that were against them, which is why they started complaining and accusing God of all of the stuff. Instead of me looking at those things as reasons I couldn't have it all, I allow those things to fuel me to have it all. Right? And so that is what I wanted to share with you all today. Now, I want to open it up for some questions because I see some of you still on here. If you're just tuning in, this is a very powerful teaching. What I actually walked you guys through was Deuteronomy 1 through 3, and I'm talking about the process, the path of the children of Israel, and the difference between those who have partial possession and those who have the full promise. I want to hit on this partial possession for just a minute, because the partial possession is that they did get some blessings and some benefits. So they didn't go out, bad and without nothing once they began to accept God's word for what it is and obey him. However, they didn't experience the fullness of it. And I believe that as we're on this earth, that God wants us to experience the fullness of his promise while we are on this earth, not just when we get to heaven. I believe that he wants us to have access to all of the promises that he has made to us while we are on earth. Okay? And the last thing I want to cover, because this just came back to me. I was wondering why, with the promise right there and them knowing the promise, and even with the evidence that they had, Moses throughout this time continued to remind them of the evidence of God being a God who keeps his promise and keeps his word. Moses continued to do that, right? But I wondered why, with all of the evidence of God being a promise-keeping God, why they still didn't believe him. And here's what came to me. And this is probably going to resonate with some of you. What came to me was this. They had been in slavery for so long. They had come out of Egypt, right? And they had been in slavery. God had been providing and supplying their needs all of this time, but they hadn't yet experienced abundance. What this means is that they had found so much safety in their struggle that when the promise of abundance was staring them in the face, they would rather stay safe in their struggle because they hadn't yet experienced what abundance looked and felt like. And so sometimes the reason you only get partial possession and you only get some of the things that you pray for, that you desire, could it be, and I want to sit this on your mind, could it be that you have found more safety in enough? And because you have yet to experience abundance and overflow and prosperity, perpetual prosperity in your life, that you would rather settle for safety and settle for small and settle for your partial possession. Could that be the case? If that resonated with you, here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask God, expand my capacity to find safety in abundance. I'm going to say it again. You can put this in the chat box. Expand my capacity so that I find safety in abundance. The reason is because where you feel safe, you'll stay. And a lot of times we stay in just having a little bit or just enough, and we don't really receive the abundance or the overflow or the prosperity or the full promise. Is because we have found safety in enough. He has provided, we have proof that he's provided our needs. However, when you haven't ever experienced an abundance or an overflow, that is unfamiliar territory to you. And you can find yourself staying in that safe zone, right? However, in the safety of smallness, you will never get to the safety of abundance. In the safety of smallness, you won't get to the safety of abundance. Abundance should be your safe space because that is the land and that is what God has promised you. Okay? Struggle and smallness is a place where you have settled and decided that you can only have part of a partial possession and not the full promise of God, where you feel like you only deserve or this is all that you should be able to get. But there is more. However, in order for you to do that, you can't stay and settle in the safety of smallness. You have to ask God to expand your capacity to find safety and abundance. Okay? Now, do we have any questions real quick? I'm going to give about 3 or 4 more minutes just to answer any questions that you all have. If you don't have any questions, just say no, so that way I'll know. There is a little bit of a delay on this live. So I'm going to give you guys a few seconds just if you have some questions. And if you do, I'll answer those. If not, then we can wrap it up. And for those who are just tuning in, you can actually go back and, you can watch the replay. Okay, Tamika says no questions. Thank you, Tamika. What was your biggest takeaway? Anybody, what was your biggest takeaway from this? Uh-oh. I'm still here. I'm still here. It answered my question on why I doubt. Good, good. I'm glad that it answered your question, Aries. Asking God to expand our mind for abundance. Yes, you need to expand your capacity, because the thing about abundance is you have to have enough room to receive it. And some of us don't have enough room to receive it because we're holding on to things that we found safety in. We don't have enough room to receive the abundance because we're holding on to the past and the present when God is trying to release to us the things that he's promised. So you just want to make sure that you are, that you're making room, for the abundance. Okay, so making room for the abundance looks like cleaning out so that you have more room. Rhonda says your teaching was good. Thank you. You are welcome. Thank you, Rhonda. Yes, Tamika says expand. All right, we have 1 more minute. I'm going to give you guys 1 more minute. And if you don't have any questions, that is fine. I just came in, so I have to go back. But that was a good explanation of why we're so comfortable not expanding. Awesome, awesome. Delivered by God. That was Consuela. Hey, Consuela. Thank you for teaching. Thank you for this teaching. It was amazing. Good, good, good. I think for me, when I'm talking about the word of God, I would rather do it live because I like to teach more so. I like, just to engage better. So I'm probably just going to continue to do all these concepts, these online. Hey, hey. I hope you've been doing well. Expect more and trust God. Yes, absolutely. We should not be minimizing where God is maximized. That is my belief. So I ask God, where have I minimized what you have, what you want to maximize? Where have I settled where you want to soar me? And those are things that I do so that I am conscious of any thoughts, any behaviors, any connections, anything that's keeping me in a space that was not that's not designed for me. Aries says, I've been full-time business owner and minister for 2 years, but been stagnant and fearful, so worried if I should go get a job. Feel like God is saying no, but the doubt. So the thing is, God is a very clear God. He's not the author of confusion, okay? So anytime there is confusion, you want to ask God, where are my thoughts prioritizing yours? Because he's not the author of confusion. So again, where are my thoughts prioritizing yours? Is he speaks clearly. Is that good? Does that make sense? I don't like to say, does that make sense? I feel like it's a little, I don't know. I don't really like to say, does that make sense? It's just what comes out of my mouth. But I just want to make sure that I'm clear in communicating what I'm saying versus, positioning it as like a comprehension thing, because it's not a comprehension thing. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear. La 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 la. Okay, good. All right, so looks like we are done with our questions. Thank you all so much for tuning into this live. I appreciate you all so much. That's all I have to have for you today, and I'll be back when I have something else to say. I love you immensely and intensely. Enjoy your evening.